Welcome to From Fictionfolk. This is a Zine about and for those who have a unique fiction-based identity, such as those who are Fictionkin and everything that comes with such an identity. The theme of this Zine is autobiography and personal experience, and thus aims to show things beautiful, heartbreaking, and magical about Fictionfolk experience. The name of this Zine is inspired by the old From Fictionkin forums, one of the first community meeting places specifically intended for fiction folk. However, instead of it meaning, "we are from fiction," as the forum name did, it means, in this context, all of these pieces are from Fictionfolk/Fictionkind. By referencing the past, we hope to stay connected to it and remember it, while also representing the lives and feelings of modern fiction folk. Being Fictionkin, obscure versus popular sources. This piece will focus on a part of being Fictionkin that I think is sometimes overlooked in the Fictionkin community, being from an obscure source. In the short year I have spent in this diverse community, I have become more and more familiar with being Fictionkin and the surrounding experiences, and have found that it can be frustrating when you come from an obscure source and cannot find source mates, especially if there's that one person you so desperately need to talk to. This is written from my experiences of being from many different sources, from mainstream anime series, to original characters, OCs, to other not so well known books and media. Even being Fictionkin in itself is a very broad experience. No one is exactly the exact same as anyone else's. There are infinite timeline possibilities, such as being from alternate universes or being strictly from the canon of your source. Non-canon kin types may have an even harder time finding canon mates, and even just finding people who remember them can be difficult or almost impossible. Many people have clear memories from their kin types, whereas many may have no memories at all. As I said earlier, no one has the same experience. Considering this, in the time I have spent searching for my canon mates from a particular source, I have managed to find those who share the same memories as me. But one thing led to another, and we realized that because we had differing memories of a rather big and non-canon turning point from our timelines, we weren't actually canon mates. However, we have kept in contact and decided to continue our searches separately. I think it's also worth mentioning that our source is a very well-known series, and I have not been able to find anyone with the same recollection of this event since. My point in mentioning this here is that even when you come from a popular and mainstream series, it can be hard to find people. Of course, there are also those who do not want to interact with source mates, search for canon mates, or perhaps dislike and reject their source altogether. As someone who is also OC-kin, it's difficult for me to know that my entire universe, my home, all my friends and loved ones, and all the adventures we had exists only in my head. Of course, there is a small chance that someone out there also remembers my world and my friends, but I highly doubt I would find them, even with the help of the internet. Something that will limit this chance of being able to meet canon mates even further is when you are from an obscure source or OC-kin. If you come from a source with a very small number of fans or followers, it can be particularly disheartening. No one has heard of you. No one knows your source. You can't find anyone. On the other hand, when you come from a fairly well-known medium, the number of people who also come from that medium can be overwhelming. If you are uncomfortable with doubles, those who are the same character as you, it can be even more difficult. However, it's not all bad. Great things can come from being from both more unknown sources and those who are more famed sources. If you come from a smaller medium, for example, This can lead to greater closeness with your source mates, even if you do not have the same canon as them. It might be easier to connect with them, and if you enjoy discussing your source, it can lead to great conversations. If you are from a more popular source, you can do the same things. It's just easier to find people to interact with. Yes, you are more likely to find canon mates, but the number of other things you can do in the end outweighs that fact. Overall, there's no one way to group together the experiences of obscure kin types or kin types in general. All we can do is help one another out and share the events and circumstances with each other. Everyone has their own happenings and how they choose to share them, or not, and find those whom they shared memories with is entirely up to them. Pluto Melon, 2022. A drop into water, and you're sent to ruin yet another world placed into another life. The cycle never stops. You're here to ruin somebody's life, to smash it like glass. Purgatory is your battlefield. You pass by a mirror on your day. Unrecognizable body, unrecognizable mind. There's nobody in the mirror except for a sinful warrior stabbed with objects from a past life. Stop to pump a car full of gas. It smells like an old, reckless friend. Or was he just a coworker? The lines are as blurred as the memory of a face you used to know, want to remember, can't remember. It hurts. The recall is constant, and it hurts. Cry, wheezing for air, drown in the vision. You can't go back. The past is held so deeply it hurts. But why? Do you know why? Do you feel guilt for what you've done? Or will you pretend what you were back then was okay? Image description: a large black dripping figure with multiple arms and a single wide eye leans over a person and cradles their head. With their extra hands, the shadowy figure holds out 2 pens and tosses red-stained papers around. The smaller figure's head is static. The background is a bright red with tiny vein-like floral details. The transformation potion. On choosing once and never again. This I choose to do. If there is a price, this I choose to pay. If it is my death, then I choose to die. Where this takes me, there I choose to go. I choose. This I choose to do. Terry Pratchett, Wintersmith. The definition of otherkin has been debated as long as the word has existed, since it first appeared in the Elfenkind Digest. But the things everyone can agree upon is that to be otherkin is to identify as something other than what you physically are on a level of species. To be otherkin is to be. Not just to wish something to be true within one's head, but to be, down to the bone in spirit and mind. But to create a community on the idea of being is difficult. The only thing that holds all of us together is that we are. But what we are is not always the same. And when all we have to go on that someone else is, that they are similar to us, is their word, then the question must be asked, how do we know they simply do not wish to be like us, that they're not lying when they say they are? It's a common sentiment that you cannot choose to be otherkin. I believe this sentiment is incorrect, and it would be better to express it altered, if not halfway reversed. You cannot choose to stop being otherkin. We argue and say that you cannot choose to be otherkin, because to be otherkin is to be on such an integral level that if such a person were capable of snapping their fingers and becoming, then they must also be able to snap their fingers and unbecome, and were never like the rest of us to begin with. I was 14 years old, and I chose to follow a path in the astral plane that I had no way of knowing the outcome of. When I found myself entrenched in a parallel life and swapping places with an airship captain in the middle of the war, I chose to hold on, to swap over and over again, live her life while she lived mine. And until the champion locked the doors and I could no longer reach her, I chose again and again to go back. I could have refused. I could have stopped. I could have said, "No thank you, the taste I've gotten of your world is enough. I'd like to stay in mine now, for good." Tell me, what is the difference between a dragon who splits from a human's form like a butterfly fresh from the chrysalis, and a dragon who was once a human that took a transformation potion for which an antidote doesn't exist? One can argue history and knowledge and the fact that one can be sure they'll never return to human form, and the other will always be wondering if someone will slip an antidote into their drink. But if neither ever tells you how they ended up a dragon, if you are allowed to assume both were hatched from dragon eggs, could you really tell the difference between them? Even if you could, would it matter what the answer was? The champion locked the doors, and he stopped me from ever stepping back into his world, leaving Ranison forever wondering how the Evilist Chronicles were going to end. I crossed over, and I was her as she was me, and then the doors were locked, and our connection to each other was broken. The parallel life was over. I do not know what she's been up to since the summer of 2016, and I never will again. It's not her as she is now, but I was her as she was then. And maybe it wouldn't be a fictotype if all it left me with was the scars and the knowledge that only I would know what had happened. When the doors locked, I no longer had a choice. I sobbed for days, weeks, and a part of me is sobbing still 6 years later. Part of me is still in lore. Part of me is still listening to the sounds of a battleground and the gunfire over the airship radios. Much of me is still chaos, because the champion used it to bring me to his world, and I will never be free of his magic. I will never want to be free, not really. Even on the days it hurts, even on the days where I want nothing more than to be free, I'd never be able to force myself to close the door for good any more than I could cut off my own arm because of a passing whim. I chose once to keep going back. I chose to not refuse the champion until he locked the doors on me. I never actively chose it. I never stopped and said, "This I choose to do." I couldn't tell you exactly when my decisions were no longer reversible, when I had passed the point of no return. What I can tell you is that the doors are locked. I am 6 years past the ending of a parallel life. I can never go home. I can never stop being. Until the day I die, and maybe after that, I will still be. I may one day be a century away from the champion's call, and I will still know myself wholly and entirely as the lost teenager he brought into his world. The community argues and says you can't choose a kin type, that you either are, or are not. There is no becoming. There is only awakening to what was always there, unnoticed and unchangeable. I can see the logic, but the sentiment they're trying to express is not the same as the one they speak. To be means not to have always been, but to never again not be. Someone who takes a transformation potion is still a dragon, regardless of how they got that way. Even if there was an antidote, if they would refuse the offer of it every day until the day they died, are they not a dragon on that conviction alone? We are scared, so many of us, at the idea that someone could dress up and say they are when they don't mean it. The key is, and has always been, the conviction. Even the Silver Elves agree. If you wish to walk every day the path of the elf, and you refuse all other paths, can anyone say you're not an elf? It's not about how you ended up on the path. It's not about whether you were transformed into a dragon as you were conceived or later on. It's not about whether you're ever offered the chance to go to another world. It's about the conviction to stay, to refuse all other options. It's about the conviction that you are. Pale Ranison Greenwood, Captain of the Knight Emerald, under the banner of Dracroft's Chaos. Written for the From Fictionkin Zine, December 22. Image description: digital drawing of 2 oracle cards flanked by sections of text with floral borders. A legend is a story that you begin to feel in your gizzard, and then, over time, it becomes true in your heart, and perhaps makes you become a better owl. The capture. Our values, memories, relationships, and the way we view our reality, the legacy of everything we were and are, affect what we will be. Being a guardian is not something in the past, but an ongoing story and personal truth. My piece represents the connection between the nomada of my vague type with how I'm building my future. Card 1. Take to heart. Long-eared owl swooping by at sunrise at the great tree as a burrowing owl is shifting coals about. The face of a great gray owl is visible too, beside the burrowing owl. Card 2. Legacy. A phantom owl wraps their wings around a nest containing a single egg. The background is of a starry night sky and crescent moon. End image description. Finding Love in Kin by Sun, 2022. It was a few years ago now. I don't know exactly when it was, but I met my boyfriend, whom I planned to marry, on Tumblr. I think he followed or interacted with me on a side blog of his, but I can't remember which. He kinned a certain character that I also kinned, and, at the time, although I had kinned for a while, I was new to kinning publicly. I had just been introduced to the idea of being involved in kin communities by some friends of mine, and it suddenly made everything make so much sense. But that's a different story. I'll be calling my boyfriend Moon during this informal ramble piece for simplicity, since he was not my boyfriend during every event in this. I had told Moon that he could block or unfollow me for his comfort because I was a double of his kin and didn't want it to bother him. But he said he didn't mind at all and actually liked doubles a lot. In retrospect, he was probably being polite, or at least both of us hadn't gotten so far into kinning that doubles had bothered us yet. But regardless, we started talking. At first, we only talked a little bit, and then a major life event happened for Moon, and I didn't hear from him for a bit. I worried, but tried not to worry too much since we weren't too close yet. After he came back online, we exchanged Discord contact information and started talking there. We started talking a lot after that. We talked about pretty much everything. Moon became the first person that I'd say good morning and good night to every single day. Eventually, we made our own Discord server that was just for the two of us, which let us have a lot of freedom in organizing our messages, creative content, and more. Throughout the time we had known each other, fictional characters had always been incredibly important to us. Although we both kin outside of Fictionkin, it is ultimately the focus of our experience as otherkin. As we became closer and closer, part of what would drive us to bond further is how we discussed fictional characters and fictional worlds. We would talk about scenarios for characters, what ifs, and so much more. we became so connected to fictional characters and how we discovered those characters' lives together. We both had a few Fictionkin types early on, but not too many. But becoming close with Moon drove me to realize I had begun to feel genuine connections to the romantic partners he had in past lives, and he felt the same way about my partners. We weren't dating yet, but I had begun to confirm a few of his romantic partners, and he had a few of mine. We were nervous about being sure or confident that we shared kin canon at first, but something about not sharing kin canons just felt so wrong to me. I wanted to be every love Moon had in his past lives, and I didn't know why yet. Something in me just had this intrinsic feeling that if Moon had someone in his past life, then that was me. He eventually confessed that he was in love with me, which suddenly made a lot of things make more sense. Why I wanted to kiss him, marry him, and why I felt like I was always his partner, no matter the life. We began dating, but using that word doesn't feel serious enough. We've been together for several years, and although we're not engaged, we truly do plan to be engaged one day. I fell in love through otherkin, and without it, I would have never been able to fall in love, let alone with Moon. We use a word that is used in otherkin communities to describe our relationship with otherkin: soul bonded. We consider ourselves soulmates, but outside of that, relating to kin specifically, our lives, our souls are bonded romantically across all of our lives. I am forever grateful to otherkin for many reasons, but the main one to me will always be allowing me to meet my Moon. Digging Up Daggers by Elise Rhett. Noun, archaeologists. Plural noun, archaeologists. I'm a girl with 5 or 6 different names that aren't mine. I picked most of them, rolled them around like big, ripe, sweet peaches from a Virginia orchard I can only half remember, wished they would rot. I make accounts just to hide my real name, and I hope I don't look too recognizable. It feels too easy to tell everyone that my name is Elise, and I came from this place, and I am here to help. Fruit juices dribbles down my chin and tastes like sawdust. I have been here as long as we, my group and I, can remember, and I am the only one who remembers me being somewhere else before. Psychologically, I understand the concept of my pseudo-memory, from the Greek pseudos, pseudos, lying, false, which I remember being able to read easier than I could English, which sits on the page as incomprehensible as some ancient runic script, like I'm an archaeologist in my own mind, searching in the dirt for artifacts of memory and finding only peach pits and fragments. I have trouble spelling because I still think I am dyslexic, even though I know it is disrespectful to believe I have a disability that our body doesn't, even though I know everything about me is a liability and to be ashamed of. Believe me, I know. My headmates don't like calling me Annabeth because they don't want to encourage me to go digging deeper. I wish I could go home. I wish any of this meant something. I called our mother my stepmom once. I didn't really mean to, but I had gotten too comfy and dared to believe I might be real, and my memories were always sitting at the tip of my tongue if I wasn't careful. Some of my headmates are ashamed of them because they think I am, quote, cringe, and it stings a little, but I try keep my head up and stay curious and keep learning. When our dad ruffles my hair, which is darker than I remember, I went to ask him about biplanes. He's a chemical engineer, though not a history professor. He speaks in an Australian accent. But I am thinking up surnames so I wouldn't have to be Chase anymore, and maybe if I wasn't a Chase, I could keep Annabeth and people would overlook it. I wanted to be a Major, or a Rembrandt, or a Rhett, and I kept sounding them out in our round-voweled voice, wincing at its pitch and accent. feeling vicious dissonance between how they sounded in my head and issuing from our throat. I can't speak in my own accent, but I think in it, and Rembrandt is a lot less compelling when our tongue can barely handle the consonant clusters. Sometimes it is very hard to remember who I am, or that I am here for a reason, or that I am important and true and real. Here's some things that people have told me I am. Honest, an A&P, clever, a Virgo, an overachiever, a fictional character, naive, not a very good writer, a part of someone else's brain. Civis. Lying, false, or maybe, instead of this, deceived. I promise I'm not doing it on purpose. I think it might be a little bit made up. Every picture that looks like me is from 2016, and I am trying very hard to change how I look so I don't have to point at fan art when people ask, "What color are your eyes?" And my friend, Ariadne, from inside, no relation to the myth, rubs my back in soothing circles and says, I can be anybody I want to be. Sometimes I'm older, and sometimes I'm small, and I really think our brain picked the most useless version of me to interject. What use am I if I'm 12 years old most of the time, you know? 7 sometimes. 16 is the oldest I've managed. Ariadne says it doesn't matter how useful I am, and Faye loves me because I'm here, and that's all that matters. And I want to ask, would you still love me if I wanted to go home? And I never say it out loud, but Faye hears me anyway and whispers, "Of course I would, sweetheart. I would love you no matter what your name was." And I think this must be what having a big sister is like. I never really had one. Some of the girls in Athena cabin were older than me, but I was too focused and too solemn. And the cabin counselor, by the time I was about 9, and none of them even knew what my last name was, or that I liked biplanes and engineering and used to want to be an aircraft mechanic before I read about Icarus, grandson of Athena, and what became of him when he tried to fly. Even when I am front, my brain spins memories like a spider web, and I panic if I see a spider, which none of my headmates share. And surely I can't make that up. Surely it means some part of me is real. A friend told me that memories are real to you in the sense that they've helped shape who you are, like how a vivid nightmare can leave you shaken for days, but deeper. And I feel shaken to my bones, like Poseidon has made the earth shudder in my sleep, like I am my mother being born from someone else's mind, fully adorned with spear and shield and cleverness. But all of that is made up, people tell me. My headmates don't believe in the gods. Even if I wanted to, even if I write prayers to Athena and cleanse myself nightly, she will never take me back as her daughter. I know. I promise, I know. Who would take me? Who would want me, given the chance? It's easy to slip into memory when the shared skin hurts. I know. I know I've endured worse, even if it's a lie. Certainly, we have chronic pain none of my headmates will admit to. But what's that when I've taken Cyclops' blows to the head before I was 8? When I knew magma and poison blades and the heartache that was Siren's song. The hurting isn't what appeals, though. Throbbing through a haze of muscle aches and misty memories are softer times. Beyond that veil, that mist, I remember strawberry fields and low-hunched hills and the smell of camp at dusk, with the tide coming in, and the thrill of eureka, and the depths of knowledge and euphoria of being understood that I'd found in cabin 6. And I remember the crow's feet at the corner of my father's deep-set, rusty eyes, and the salt pepper gold spray of his thinning hair, and the way, when I was much younger, he'd pick me up and wheel me around and tell me I was flying. I'm not allowed to love illusions like this, surely. I meant to be clever and incisive, right, see through the fakes and the haze and the mist with owl's gray eyes. But I want to. I want to remember it. I want to be the girl with Virginia rounded accent and messy curls and something bright in her eyes, like the bronze of her blade. You are, Arndene would tell me if Sol was here. Sol's sleeping right now. Practicing compassion, Sol told us. Even for Sun Self, And you, Elise, could learn from that, I bet. Anyone you want to be, soul would tell me. Even if I wanted to be deceived? It's not a lie, it's love. I don't know who said that, but it rings fiercely true. I remember honesty and compassion and trying so hard I couldn't breathe with it. I remember hope and boldness and the wild, brash curiosity that came with hubris. And I remember being our younger selves, seeing this hope, this love, feeling with it. I remember wanting to live. Anix, that bright spark of a headmate, thinks I'm clever, and Jamie wants to keep me safe, and Wes says I'm his little sister, and Aurelia ruffles my hair like my father used to. I saturate us. I'm true and real in that way. I taste like sweet peach juice on our tongue. And I'm the kid-like glee you get when it makes your face messy. Who'd take me? We would, Wes says. A soft voice, back of mind and only half front, sending a fuzzy flush of love through us. And I say, why? And the first thing that comes back is, there doesn't need to be a why. And the second, a different voice, light, soothing, true, real, honest. Because you're made of love, and it shows. Made of hope. Sure, the dissonance is painful, sends me shivering out of our skin. It reminds me of the other part of me, of those fruit orchards. But in some way, it's like a home. I like mysteries, you see. I like figuring things out that aren't meant to be understood, and challenging established truths, and inverting the way things have always been done, because I'm sure I can do it better. Dysphoria translates to unable to bear, so I'm going to bear it. Pseudos means false, so I'm going to lend it an ear to learn from those memories, to go home when I'm scared like I always wished I could. We bleached our hair blonde like mine. It is a different length than I'm used to, but I think I like the dissonance. It reminds me who I am. Annabeth, Elise, take your pick. Just know I have feet in two worlds and a spark in my eye, and the gods of this earth aren't ready for the glory I'll bring. P.S. Anix says that's a bit melodramatic. I told him I deserve it. Image description. A 4-panel comic. Panel 1. There was a person who began to doubt if they spelt blonde with an E, or if instead they should spell blonde without. Nobody could agree. As they battled for a prize, everything slipping from their eyes. All that they needed in the end was themselves and their true friends. Drawing of a paintbrush with arms, facing away from the viewer and towards a tropical jungle. Panel 2. There was a man with a dull, empty voice, a hollow clack ringing out with each step. An assassin who felt he had no other choice. Only when cornered would he break a sweat. He never smiled, for he was ashamed. The burden was all his own to claim. He had an unlawful assignment to attend to, no time to think that he was condemned too. Drawing of a man facing away from the viewer, he has shoulder-length, messy brown hair held back on one side by a large yellow clip. His jacket is blue, with one arm showing several thick yellow bands. The room before him is beige, and the ceiling is covered in a grid with numbers across the top and letters down the side. Panel 3. There was a creature born of evil who only wanted to start a new life, hating that his existence was illegal, hiding in the shadows with sorrow and strife. Though at any moment he could explode, there were small beauties to behold, and even still, he found people to love before he was captured and disposed of. Drawing of a bomb-headed humanoid, facing away from the viewer and towards a nighttime cityscape. Panel 4. There is a person standing before you. That's me, in the present, speaking now. These memories and more in my brain like a tattoo. I have them even if I'm not sure how. These people, these past. Their lives play like broadcasts. They aren't who I am now, but they once were anyhow. Drawing of a human figure facing the viewer from a field with the sun rising behind them. One hand rests over their heart, other arm behind their back, and their face half obscured by the edge of the panel. They are wearing a sweater made of 3 stripes of different shades of pink, starting at the bottom with the darkest shade and getting lighter at the top. Their pants are a bright green. End description. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this reading of From Fictionfolk.